Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range U.S.-focused forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, I need to be completely honest with you. After I released the video, the long-range video from last Thursday, I remember walking down and talking to my wife, and I said, I just feel like I missed something with this video. I felt like something was getting away from me, kind of like the way Ozuna misjudged that particular ball there. Now, I'm trying to make light of this, but I'll be honest with you. When I finished that video, I said, I feel like there's change coming. I feel like the models have got something wrong, but I wasn't confident enough to call against the models, to be honest with you. Now, I try my hardest to be honest. I try to provide better perspective than what else is out there. Just to give you an example here, or I hope I can provide better observations and better forecast than what you might get out of the Farmer's Almanac, which, by the way, remember, summer 2014 was calling for extremely hot and dry summer here, was one of our best growing seasons. Now, I'm not trying to throw the Farmer's Almanac or the groundhog under the bus, although sometimes I'd like to throw the groundhog under the bus, but I'm trying to say that, last week I wanted to throw my forecast out by the time I saw it on July the 4th because so much had changed toward the end of last week, and we got to talk about that and take a look at what the new long-range updates do. That's what we do. When we get new information, we process it. We've had this concern all along. That's my son. He's almost 7 years old. This is a picture of some corn in Champaign County, and the concern has been with extremely late plant, is this crop going to mature? And no, my son is not a giant. He's just a normal little boy, and you can see here how far behind the corn crop is. We know why. This is the year-to-date precipitation anomalies. I mean, just look at this. We are across such a huge section of the country extremely wet. And if you just look at the statewide precipitation ranks from July 2018 all the way to June 2019, we have several states that are setting their all-time wettest 12-month time periods on record, and several states that are just behind that. Only a couple of places that are drier than normal, Washington and Montana, over that same time period. And look at the differences between last year's temperatures in May and temperatures this year in May. On the right over here, I've got 2019, and on the left, I have 2018. It was a highly amplified pattern. Do you remember this? The pattern was doing something like this for so much of our spring and brought not only that, but some incredibly heavy rainfall to this region and a lot of severe weather. While the southeast baked under this ridge, it was very hot down here. We were very cold in May across the northern tier states simply due to this flow pattern. Look at June. This is the same data just for June now. June 18 on the left, June 19 on the right. This crop did not play catch up in the month of June, well, at least until the end of it. And what you're looking at here is the last 10 days of temperature anomalies. And we've actually switched over to this pattern that's had this highly amplified trough ridge system that looks something like this. That's the flow of the jet stream. There's been a pretty permanent feature over here in an upper level low sitting off of the northeast. We've had troughing here along the west coast of the United States in this big omega pattern where we have these two lows pinching this big ridge here. And remember, we talked about the record heat we saw in Alaska because of that. Well, many of us here in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, and really most of the Corn Belt, have been seeing these above average temperatures, and it's helped this crop catch up a little bit. But the big question is, what is the change that we started to see at the end of the weekend, especially over the weekend, that made us change our forecasts? So let's talk about it. This is what's going on today. These are heat advisories. Look at this. We've got quite a bit of hot and very humid air. In fact, looking at high temperatures for today, this is just today on Wednesday. It's not just the fact that we're getting up here into the low 90s across a huge section east of the Rocky Mountains here. It's the fact that the humidity, the Gulf of Mexico is wide open and the moisture transport is there to really crank the humidity up, making it extremely uncomfortable for our temperatures. So the question is this going to stick around? Is this cooler bias that we still have right now in the north central plains, where our high temperature is only going to get up in the upper 70s, maybe lower 80s? And I'll tell you, that's just due to this low pressure system that's here moving on off in this direction. It's going to leave and the temperature is going to warm back up. My original thoughts up to July 3rd and even early in the morning of the July the 4th was I was seeing these things. I said, well, we still have this negative North Atlantic oscillation. And if the North Atlantic oscillation is negative and we have this trough that's sitting off the northwest, that could continue with our cooler biasing this draft of the country. El Nino still had it still had an influence, and we saw some indications that it was going to be weakening, but if it stayed active for the rest of the summer, that's a cooler, more active summertime pattern. We had high latitude blocking over Alaska. If that persisted, we tend to have a cooler weather here in the midsection of the country. We had a strong subtropical high in the middle Atlantic. That tends to give us a wetter bias. And the North Pacific, the Central Pacific was warm. And all of those things pointed toward a picture that was going to give us a ridge that was going to set up a bit more like this and dive into a trough that set up right in through that area. And you saw the reflection of that. And we talked about this for a while. The concern was, is this crop ever going to get going and really be able to make up lost time? And I said, gosh, it looks as though as we get to the end of the month, and this was valid for the end of July, I said it looks as though the warmth we're having right now at the end of June and the first half of July fades. And we made a case for that. And then things began to change. We have to talk about that. So what changed? I'll tell you this. If El Nino dominated our summer and fall, I want you to look over here on the right first. I showed you this last time. If it dominated our fall, so I'm specifically looking here at October, we tended to have a flow pattern that did something a bit more like this, remember? And that tended, El Nino falls tend to give us cooler fall weather. So we were very concerned that if El Nino maintained strength, that we would have a cool fall. The other thing it does is this is July. During July, if we have stronger El Nino conditions, we tend to get very strong winds into this area. That's an active pattern. That's not a pattern that allows for sustained heat to stick around, and it's one that brings in plenty of Gulf moisture, and we tend to be wetter. What you're looking at over here on the left are what we call zonal winds, the strength of the east to west flowing wind, or the west to east, doesn't matter. That X direction wind, it tends to be very strong out of the subtropics right in through here. So if that's what El Nino would do, did we see any sort of changes? Well, I alluded it last time. We had seen since the end of May that right in the Central Pacific, I'm talking right in here, this is called Nino Region 3.4. See it labeled there? We saw the temperatures fading there, and we knew temperatures were already fading over toward average, maybe even slightly cooler than average, just off of the west coast of South America. But we still had a lot of warm water here tucked away in the North Pacific. But if El Nino was fading, and it was forecast to continue to fade. Now, this is just one model, but you can see here going back over, kind of in the neutral phase, that may have been able to remove it. And I commented on it. I said, if we pull this off the table, it may make a case for later in the season, well, a better forecast, at least for our corn and soybean farmers in the midsection of the country. But I was not overly confident. I wasn't sitting there going, oh, this is going to happen. This is exactly what I see. And, I didn't swing for the fences. I played a bit more cautious. Well, what changed? Well, it's not just El Nino that has been fading fast. It's been the upper levels of the atmosphere. You're looking down here on the North Pole, and I've got you out just 10 days. So now we're looking out here to the 20th of July. This was about the time period where I said, hey, we're going to fade back over into some cooler temperatures. What changed? Well, one of the big things that changed is sitting here, another is here, and another is here. Inside of those three areas, I saw heights fall here, so I'll put an X in it. I saw heights fall there, and I saw them starting to rise here, so I'll put an O inside that. And the whole point of showing you these features in the models is that allowed for this ridge that was sitting here to broaden. And when it broadens, it shoves the jet stream north. And you know that in summer, the farther north we shove the jet stream, well, the warmer it's going to be. That's very typical of summer. So this change from last week, gosh, I just wanted to throw away that forecast. I wanted to delete it, but I'm never going to do that. I want you all to know the history of my forecast, so I didn't. But it was a miss, and it was a big miss for me. So in addition to that, we have a wild card now, and I'm going to cover this in great detail in tomorrow morning's ag forecast. But what do we see? Well, we had a tropical system that didn't emerge out of the Gulf of Mexico, didn't emerge out of the Caribbean, and it certainly didn't emerge out of the Atlantic where we typically see these things. This tropical system came right here out of this area. And it was hanging on a boundary, sitting right into here, a lot of thunderstorms. They've now shifted down here into the Gulf of Mexico. And currently, this system, which could be named Barry, is sitting here. Now, I'm recording this very early in the morning on Wednesday, so we'll have to see throughout the day how this evolves. But what's going on here is that the forecast models have provided a pretty wide spread on the potential path of Barry. Now, please understand that when you look at these forecasts, don't just let your eyes say, well, let's just take it right down the middle like that and bring that just the remnants of the system through Arkansas, through Missouri, and straight into Illinois. It has the option of following any of these trajectories, and it's not completely out of the water yet that this system doesn't hang even south of the primary Corn Belt. If I made a forecast based purely on the European ensemble, it does look as though there's a decent chance that this system comes up here into Missouri, into the southern half of Illinois, getting over into Indiana and Ohio, over toward the eastern Corn Belt. Now, where I live right now in central Illinois, I'll tell you there are some places around here where we would welcome this rain, even though it's still several days out in the forecast. But we do need this system to come up into the midsection of the country, because without it, things would have been high and dry. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We do have the current system moving right now through the north central plains, heading off in that direction. But what's going on is the operational. Now, this is purely just one model run. The latest model run has got this system coming right through this corridor, the remnants of it at least, bringing a lot of rainfall into that area. But please understand, the spread is still sizable. That could go anywhere in there, taking the center of that heavy rainfall. The threat all along with this system as it comes into the south central part of the United States, really right down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley, is going to be the flooding rainfall. Okay, I really want the focus to be on the flooding rainfall. That's going to be the most damaging aspect of this system after it gets on land and starts to move north. So we are still a few days, several days away from this thing coming on shore, but I've seen pretty consistent model runs suggesting that this is the likely track. It is going to fit somewhere inside of the guidance I've given you right in through here, and then eventually make its way back into the upper level flow over there through the eastern Corn Belt. So this is what we're honing in on right now on this particular wild card. But what's changed overall? Well, we've seen a bit of a slowing of the jet stream. It's become a bit more wavy, and it is retreating to the north, okay? And as it does that, that's really going to change our overall flow pattern moving forward. So let me show you what this does in terms of temperatures. Next 5 days, we still hang on to this warmer bias. You're saying, but you see cooler in here and you see cooler in there. Yes, we still have that weak trough in this area, and as this system emerges in this area, a lot of cloud cover and rainfall. But watch this. This is now taking you days 5 through 10, so this gets you all the way out here from the 15th of the month through the 20th. We actually see the flow pattern going back into something a bit more like this. That flatter pattern that's moved a bit more to the north. We see the broader ridge over the eastern part of the country here. So we go back over to that warmer pattern. And this is what both the European model on the right and the GFS on the left are calling for in the 11 to 15 day time period. Now, this is the time period where in previous forecasts I said we are probably going to start to see some cooling down. But like I said, toss that out. We have new information, and the new information is suggesting that this region in through here is going to continue to stay on that warmer bias. And you can see it in this part of the country. Now our concern starts to go over to, well, if the jet streams retreated north, what is this going to do to our precipitation patterns? We are in a full-blown summer precipitation pattern set up right now. And without that tropical system coming through, I'm telling you, it would have been dry, much drier over the eastern half of the country over the coming days here. But that tropical system is kind of our wild card. Well, let's go ahead and stretch this out and see what the models are suggesting. So this is the last week of the month of July. We still see a very broad ridge. We see higher than normal, heights here. And the influence of the trough over the Hudson Bay is a bit more elongated in this direction, all right? And as a consequence, look at the warmth we expect to see here. Now, this pattern also tries to bring our trough feature a little bit farther back to the west, which is why we start to see the recovery of some warmth in this region in the western United States. I'll say this, even though the Pacific Northwest in the near term does carry near average to slightly cooler than average weather, California does not. We're going to see warm, very warm temperatures, especially in the Central Valley there over all the foreseeable future I've got right now. So that's the last week of July. What about the first week of August? You probably noticed it didn't see much of a change. The broader ridge is still sitting in this area. The jet stream is still up here in Canada. And again, the shape of that trough plus what's going on with the raising of the heights here and here is just pushing things north and, well, keeping things overall across the United States, which is what you can see over there on the right, on the warmer side of things. It's not extreme heat. I'm not saying that it's just not the cooler weather that we saw. Could there be days of much above average temperatures as we get into the end of July and August? Yes. And remember, that's our hottest time period climatologically in the midsection of the country, which means a 3, 4, 5 degree warm anomaly is extremely hot, just given that it's the hottest time of year. And now I'm going to take you out to August 15th. So this is the week of August 8th through the 15th. And you just notice that the jet stream is not letting go of that pattern. Broad ridge across this area. And so the European model wants to hang on to that warmth. Now, again, we're primarily focusing in on one model here, but we tried to provide some supporting evidence for this. If I'm wrong, before you look at those pictures, if I'm wrong, we have to see a major shift in our high latitude blocking pattern. In other words, things have to change over Greenland. Things have to change over Alaska. Things have to change over the Hudson. They have to change in Siberia. I'll watch it, monitor it, and keep you up to date on it. But if those things happen, expect my forecast to change again. If the El Nino base state features of the Pacific, if they come back for a stretch of time, that's going to take our weather patterns down a different road as well. Not forecasting that in the immediate future, but if it does, it's something to watch out for. We are now in the season where tropics are the wild card. We could have systems coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Western Atlantic that, on a week's timescale can change everything. And our bigger oscillations, the Madden-Julian oscillation, the quasi-biennial oscillation, and the atmospheric angular momentum, that's basically telling me how fast the atmosphere is moving. If these things continue to stay in a phase that's favorable for warmer weather, well, yes, we'll continue to see this. We're going to watch to see if they work against one another, though. So that's what could go wrong. Got to pay attention to those things. That's why we try to live within that 2-week time frame rather than stretching this out so far and trying to be overly confident in the forecast. I do need to show you what the longer range models are seeing, though. Every one of the maps down here are for August. What you see down here on the right is the latest model run for July. What I'm showing you here is what it looked like when we ran the model in June for August temperatures and back in May for August temperatures. And what I want you to see is that transition, model trend. The models have trended toward a warmer August at this point. This isn't a forecast that says, look out for extreme, it's going to burn us to... No, I'm just showing you the model trend, and that's all that I want you to interpret. We don't talk about extremes until we're looking at the 1 to 2 week time period. What we're looking at here is a model trend. What about precipitation? I'll just show you last month's versus this month's. Now remember, in last month's forecast, the model was focusing more on a pattern that did this. That's a whole lot more ridge riding thunderstorms in through this corridor. If we take that same jet stream pattern and shift it a bit farther north, look at where the ridge riders are now forecast by the model. And you see a drier stripe in through here. Now somebody going, oh my gosh, I got to worry about this massive dry down of what's going on. Please, we still have a lot of moisture in the soil. We still have an open Gulf of Mexico, which means we can continue to get summertime precipitation patterns. I'm talking about a lot of daily convection. This is just the model being consistent with itself in where it's placed the jet stream, the overall flow of the atmosphere, and what it's doing with its moisture budget. That's all that's going on here. We are looking at these simply for perspective and clues. These models are not gospel truth, okay? To finish this up, okay, if we're going to get a lengthened growing season, if we're going to lengthen this growing season, which is what we need it to do, I'm going to name a few things that I want you to watch with me. I went out and I just found our warmest Octobers for the primary corn and soybean belt, all right? And what do they typically feature? They feature these two things. See these broader troughs that sit in the Gulf of Alaska and south of Greenland? If we can get the pattern to do that, the jet stream wants to do this. Yes, that's cool for the Northwest, but it's warm in the central part of the country for our fall. And if we need this crop to get a few extra weeks, this is the kind of pattern that we want to see sitting, which means you're going to have to watch with me to see if we're forecasting more ridging here over parts of Europe, a trough over the Greenland area, a trough over the Gulf of Alaska. If that begins to build into our forecast as fall begins, that could be a very favorable picture for what's left of grain fill and what's left of letting this crop dry down in the field and letting it get to black layer without having a first frost fear. What else has to happen? Well, we need that El Nino event to continue to fade. I made a case that says if El Nino hangs on, falls are cool in the primary corn belt. Well, if we can get rid of it and keep this water getting cooler, that would be a favorable thing to think about the end of our season staying warm. Now, I know a lot of folks are still seeing other features. For example, if we paid attention to some of our what we call our low frequency tropical features, it may suggest the opposite of what I'm telling you here. In addition to that, there are a few other forecasters that use other metrics that suggest that still we have to be concerned about a cool fall. And I am not telling you that a warm fall is in the cards. I'm just showing you things that have to happen for us to get a warm fall. But if our global models give us any sort of a clue, there is some good news, and that is the fact that we do see that for September, October, November, at least this part of the ocean is fading in terms of temperatures, maybe moving over toward INSO-neutral, maybe even weak La Nina, and that would help with giving us a lengthened growing season. But I am not making a call on this just yet, okay? There's still a lot to be looking at. That's why we're going to look at it every week. All right, that's the map I'm going to finish on here, and I hope that you found this useful and insightful. But with that, we'll wrap it up. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions hope you look forward to our next long-range forecast coming out next week. Have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.